speaker today, Tom Cheek, who is running for Cobb County Commissioner, District 3. Joanne Burrell currently holds that seat. Tom is a Madison Forum member, and we're very proud of Tom and a couple of other Madison Forum members who were involved in arguing before the Georgia State Supreme Court. And now Tom is not an attorney, but he argued the case before the Georgia State Supreme Court, and you can see it on YouTube. Where else can you see it, Tom? On Madison Forum, I think.
Yeah, that's the only place I've seen it.
Okay, so you can see, but for a non-attorney to argue a case, and the case was that Cobb County commissioners did not have the authority to place a bond.
Let me correct you one moment.
Go ahead.
Is that I argued in front of the Cobb County Court that the SPLOST spending on items that were not on the list were illegal. I think one of the things you're attributing to me was actually Larry Savage.
Larry Savage.
That's right.
Thank you. Larry Savage, another Madison Forum member who argued before the Georgia Supreme Court. Thank you very much. And as all of you know, or most of you know, in order to issue a bond, a certain amount of money, it has to be a referendum. It's in the Georgia State Constitution. And that bond was issued without a referendum, illegally. And so 3 people argued before the Georgia State Supreme Court, and if you look it up in the Georgia State Constitution, it's there, it's unambiguous language. And the Supreme Court of Georgia ruled unanimously that it was okay. So the commissioners around the state, even though there's maybe only one commissioner in a county, can go ahead and okay the issuance of a bond without a referendum. Georgia has the reputation, and I can't cite where I have heard this, somebody else here can, as being in the top 5 most corrupt states in the United States. So, with that, I'll turn it over to Tom. Tom, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, y'all. Hope you don't mind if I stand. I have a tendency to pace a little bit when I talk, and I do a much better job actually when I'm a little casual. I am a candidate for the Cobb County Board of Commissioners, District 3. I'm going to tell you very briefly the pillars of my campaign, but I'm not here to give you a campaign speech. I don't have any notes. I don't read from cards. I just enjoy telling my story. I am running to be on the Board of Commissioners because I believe that Cobb County is kind of overstepping its bounds as far as the role of county government. I believe that the role of county government is to provide quality services at a reasonable cost to taxpayers. That's it. None of the redistribution of wealth, none of the overstepping of those boundaries. Now, when I share my story, you'll understand a little bit more about this next pillar of my campaign, is that I believe that SPLOST needs to be reformed from the ground up. I believe that there is a lot of slush fund mentality when it comes to SPLOST, and I believe that a lot of decisions are made with the taxpayers' interests not at the forefront. I also believe the third pillar of my campaign is that the Board of Commissioners should be following the land use plan when it comes to zoning decisions. There shouldn't be this repeated monthly circus of this special interest versus the needs of taxpayers when it comes to making specific zoning decisions. And I'm happy to answer in detail any questions about those pillars. I'm going to have some contact information for you. I know better than to bring campaign literature inside that doorway, but I'm going to have some contact information on a business card that I'll make available to you when we're finished. Now, about those 3 pillars, I'd love to go into more detail. But what I'm doing today, what I wanted to do today, was just to share my story. To just tell you who I am and why I'm running for office. What has motivated me to do this. Until about 4 years ago, I was a responsible taxpayer and voter. I would study the issues for an average of a couple of hours every time the vote came up, and I would do a little research, and I felt like I was making an informed decision. I would listen to someone give a speech occasionally. I would watch the news on television. So I probably knew about 25% of what I really needed to know to vote, you know, in the way I should be voting. And then, you know, which put me above average, by the way, you know, at the time. And then something happened that drew my attention to Cobb government locally. You know, it was an experience that brought to light to me that everything that I thought was okay wasn't really okay. And my experience was a very personal one. And what happened was, you know, through some events, some life events, the quality of service through the medical examiner's office was brought to the forefront for me and my family. So at a time where something that is very important to me, I'm keenly interested in what's happening, events came to where I was going to be reviewing how well this office did their job. Okay? And what I found was that folks were not trained to do their job. Funding was not going to where it needed to go. There was no accountability, and there was no one watching over it. And because of the dramatic and emotional nature of when folks are presented with those problems with the MD's office, they didn't have the time or effort or energy to pursue them. And things just happened to where I made that time, and I had that energy, and I did pursue them. And maybe that's what I am, because, you know, I can tell you, I do not possess the legal knowledge of law. I do not possess the detailed knowledge of how the Cobb transportation system works, like Ron. I found that today I certainly don't have the athletic skills that Michael Opus has. As a matter of fact, you know, I remember the first time I was humbled on that account. I'm a Cobb County native. I was born and raised in Mapleton, Georgia. And I remember certain events through my life. I'm sure you all do. I don't have a good memory, but there's certain events I remember through my life that just made an impact. And you can remember them as if they happened this morning. And one of those was I was probably 9 years old, and I was doing the best I could to play on a little baseball team that played at Lions Cult Park in Mapleton. And I was a big baseball fan. I can still name the entire batting order of the 1969 Atlanta Braves. And I thought I was going to be a great baseball player one day. I kind of thought I was already. And I remember asking my dad after a practice, I said, "Dad, am I fast?" He said, "Son, you have average speed." I said, "Dad, that's what they say about the slow guys." Because, you know, the slowest player on a Major League Baseball team, they'll put speed average, you know. And I said, that's what they say about the slow guys. And he looked me right in the eye. I still remember exactly. He looked me right in the eye and said, "Son, you have average speed." At that moment, I knew I was not a star athlete. And so my point is, you know, I can't really think of anything along this process where I can say, I'm well above average at this, or except maybe a couple of things. My stubbornness and my ability to research. Okay? Because what I did at that point was I said, I'm not giving this up. I've got a tiger by the tail, and I see money being wasted, and I see a lack of oversight, and I'm a taxpayer, and I pay for this, and it hurts people. The type of below average performance that I saw wasn't just going to get somebody thrown out at second base. It was really going to hurt families. It was going to hurt investigations. Honestly, I found things that were so bad that the level of investigation actually, it's hard to believe this because they're investigating deaths that already happened, actually caused people's deaths. Because there were murders that they didn't classify as murders, those people went on to murder again. Imagine that. And that's where the fault lied right there. So, I kicked in and started researching. And I didn't know it at that point where my journey was going to end, but I thought, I'm going to find out what's wrong with this thing, and I'm not going to give up, and I'm going to get it fixed. And I knew nothing. I knew nothing about how those offices ran, so I went and talked to experts. I talked to the top ME in California. I talked to the state ME. I talked to ME in Texas. I learned how the offices were supposed to be run. And I compared them to what I saw, and there was a big difference. I went before the Board of Commissioners and I said, hey, you're supposed to be overseeing this office, you're doing a poor job. They didn't even know they were supposed to be able to oversee the office. They didn't even know that that person worked for the county. They didn't know that there was a $500 million contract that went to one individual. And at one point, it was his responsibility to pay employees in the office and pay the expenses of the office out of that $500,000. At some point, a couple of decades ago, there was a clerical error. And that clerical error meant, we're going to give him his $500,000, but wait a minute, those are county employees, right? So we're going to start paying them. We're going to start paying the expenses of the office, we're going to start buying equipment, and we're going to start doing all these other things. We're going to pay the rent, we're going to pay all this, but we're still going to give this guy $500,000. And it went on for 20 years. Except every year there was a 3% increase in the $500,000. That's the kind of thing I found. And, you know, it was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it, so I said, then I started going to Board of Commissioners meetings. I said, let me show you what I found. This person's not qualified to do their job. They're really in a position they shouldn't be in, and money's being wasted, taxpayer money. So I would sit through the meetings. When I first got up to speak, I am not a public speaker. I stood at the front of that podium, and my hands were shaking. And it was such an emotional topic for me, tears were coming out of my eyes. But you know what? I stuck through it. And because I was so determined to fix this issue that I found, I said, I'm sticking to it. I'm coming back, I'm going to talk about it over and over again. And I did, and I never gave up. The Board of Commissioners listened to me. I got air quotes going on that. They listened to me. They said, please be patient. It takes a lot of time to fix things in government. We understand you, et cetera, et cetera. I worked on it for over a year, and then finally it was decision time. Finally, they reviewed it. I worked with the county auditor. They looked at details, and they said, hey, this office isn't run right. It's got it right. There's 28 things wrong in this office that we need to fix. So I went back to the board, and they made their decision. They said, we're going to keep the guy. We're just going to keep things like they are. So I ended up having to go before the Georgia Medical Board and make my case there, and I won. Okay, because that was a board of doctors listening to me, and when I went before them and said, "Look what I found," they said, "Holy smokes, we didn't know, and we're going to fix it," and they did. But as soon as I went to the medical board, then resignation happened and the office was rebuilt. Now, that $500,000 goes to pay 2 full-time doctors that are qualified. They have board certification, and part-time doctors, and a lot of them are left over. And the office is beginning to be run correctly. Now, when I was going to these meetings, I was paying attention because I didn't even know how the speaker slot worked. I didn't know how the presentations would go on for 45 minutes at the beginning of the meeting and anything like that. But I learned, and then I watched, and then since I was exposed to these meetings, I listened to what the board said. Because I said, can I trust this person? Can I trust this person? And I watched all the proceedings, and then there were issues that I didn't know anything about, like transportation, like spending on hiring police officers. And I thought, that doesn't seem right either. This doesn't sound like the same thing I heard at the last meeting. What that person is saying doesn't seem to match the numbers that I'm reading in the agenda. There are things in the consent agenda that should be voted on in public. And by that point, I caught the fever. By that point, I simply was motivated to just fix anything that I found. And again, I mentioned one of the cornerstones of my campaign is SPLOST reform. And that's where I really kicked in, is when I found what is right now a $900 million slush fund. And in my opinion is the beginning of a lot of mismanaged issues with the county and the county budget, because the SPLOST is the foundation on which the yearly budgets are built. Because the SPLOST now takes care of all capital expenditures and then some, okay, and some extra slush. And so if you don't meticulously prepare the SPLOST list, then you're going to run into trouble later. You're going to build a building and you're going to realize I don't have the staff for that building. Okay? You're going to build a road and you're going to realize, wait a minute, I didn't coordinate that well enough with another county or the Georgia State entity or something else. All I did was throw it on the list at the last minute. And I watched the SPLOST list that we're currently paying for on the final vote. And you would think that when you're getting ready to spend, they said $750 million, it's really $900 million. That's part of the slush aspect. When you lowball the expected income, that you're giving yourself the ability to spend that other $150 million on whatever you want, according to the Board of Commissioners. Let me tell you, the final decision on that list was made at the last minute, under emotional circumstances, after a 2.5-hour argument at about 10:50 p.m. at a Board of Commissioners meeting. When everyone was tired, they really couldn't argue their points logically at that point, and they were up against a deadline. They had to pass it that night in order for it to be on the ballot. And we're talking about $750 million in their opinion, $900 million in my opinion, and they're just arguing over $100 million here, $200 million here. Does the BRT go in there? No, it doesn't. Well, how do we backfill it with big numbers here since the BRT's out? That decision was made on the fly in the heat of the moment, with them scratching out things off of the agenda and handwriting them in and then voting on it. And if that's how you build the foundation of your budget, you got problems. That's why today, we don't even really know what the budget deficit is in Cobb County. We don't really know. Is it 31 million for 2019? Is it 30 million? I've done some studying. Is it 55? That's right. Is it 55? Is it somewhere between 31 and 55? Or does it not even exist? Does the deficit not even exist? Because is there that same extra padding built into the revenue side? Are they underestimating the value of the digest on purpose so that they have more slush fund? And I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, the board said we don't have $1.1 million to give to charitable efforts, which I don't believe in county level redistribution of wealth. I don't agree in county level irresponsible redistribution of wealth. That's what we have the federal government for. Okay. That's right. Yeah. They've been doing it for a long time and they're really good at it. We don't need the counties to do that. Okay. All right. You know, so that's their thinking. That's their foundation. So right now, it looks like they're lowballing revenue to lines because now all of a sudden they're going to be voting on giving this 1.1 million out on Tuesday again. Where does the money come from? We didn't have it 5 weeks ago. Where did it come from? That's, you know, when you work with soft top line numbers on purpose because you want a slush fund, you'll end up with it. So that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to stop. I don't want to leave time for questions. I hope you'll ask me questions. I have a tendency to kind of trail off here and there, but what I want to try to do is give you you know, a little bit of my backstory. It's something that I've been told I have a hard time doing. I love talking about facts. I love talking about numbers. That's how I got involved in this, and that's why I decided that I could do more from the inside from the outside. Although, you can do a lot from the outside. One individual with you know, the stubbornness and time to research and a feel for what they're doing, a passion is the word I was searching for. A passion for what they're doing can do it. Once I found that SPLOST thing, I didn't give up. I'll touch on what Michael was talking about. I read the law on SPLOST, I swear I read it 150 times. And I said, nowhere in here, in this state law, is a path of what Cobb County is doing with SPLOST dollars. Nowhere. And what you're supposed to do with SPLOST dollars, you're supposed to have a hard list of projects, let the voters read descriptions of those projects, decide whether they want to spend the money on it, the taxes are then taken in, and then we finish those projects. And what happens right now is everything gets changed. And we spend money on things that are not on the list. And so what I did was, when I do my research is, now, there are dozens of things we spend money on that are not on the list. I say we, because the Board of Commissioners approved it, it's our money. Now, what I did was I took the firmest example I could find. And that example happened to be the Braves Bridge. Okay? Which was built with SPLOST money. It was approved for SPLOST money. All right? And we, you know, the design, engineering, and so forth was all paid for with SPLOST money. And I'm not talking about the 2016 SPLOST, I'm talking about the SPLOST before that, the 2011 SPLOST. Because it's just a slush fund, you can spend it on anything you want, so what I did was, I picked one example from the Braze Bridge, just one expenditure, and I believe it was $56,000 to move this power pole from here to here. That was it. Because it was the best example I had. There's no way that can be on the SPLOST list because it just wasn't on it. You can read every line and it isn't there. All right? So I took that to Cobb County Superior Court and I fought it. I said, no, I'm suing you. You cannot spend our tax money on this, on the Braze Bridge. And I took it all the way to Superior Court of Cobb County. And then when it got right down to the date, the negotiations started happening, and basically the court just told the county, what are you even doing? You know this is wrong. Just fix it. And so they re-voted on it. They pulled it the week before it was supposed to go to the hearing. I think they were trying to intimidate me because I'm not a lawyer, and they thought that I couldn't get up and make my case. But they realized that I was not playing softball when I put the county attorney on my witness list. I wanted the county attorney to sit up there, and I was going to ask the county attorney if she thought it was legal to spend money on SPLOST items that are not on the list. That was it. So that's when they decided we're going to re-vote on it, and we're pulling this. I made them change their vote on 3 different items. Okay, and if they thought that was going to stop me, sorry. That just motivated me to make them accountable for doing what they should be doing. And now I reach that point where I go, I think I've done a pretty good job of just a private citizen holding them accountable, making them be accountable. And now I hate that the words even rough coming out of my mouth. I want to be an elected official. But I've already said, I don't possess any skills. I'm well below average on most things. I'm not very smart, and so I'm perfect for public office.